Today's live stream is going to be all about light roasted coffee beans using a large flat burr grinder. Now that's a combination that's often used. That's why we're doing two concepts at once. And instead of dialing in one profile, we're going to use 5 profiles, all of which are profiles that are commonly used for light roasted beans. So these are the 5 most common ones. The 5 profiles we're going to do in order are the gentle and sweet. That's often people's introduction to a decent espresso machine, especially if they're doing light roasts. Extractamundo dose, which is the extremely popular light roast profile. Next, the adaptive version 2. The blooming espresso, which is one of the earliest profiles to make a name for decent espresso from Scott Rayo. And then finally another Scott Rayo profile, the Allongé. So what I'm going to be doing, which is a little bit different, is because we have such a kind of aggressive schedule for today, 5 different shots, we're going to probably take an hour to do this live, and I'm going to talk, hopefully not at all, between the shots, because the goal is once this goes on YouTube and it's saved, I'm going to cut out the boring bits where we're just making coffee. So let's do gentle and sweet. This is the first profile that is recommended. When you first buy the decent espresso machine, it says make your first espresso with gentle and sweet. And there's a few reasons I made this profile. So first of all, it is a traditional espresso profile, no long pre-infusion. It just fills the headspace, goes to pressure, makes espresso. What makes this gentle and sweet is the fact that it's 6 bar of pressure. Now, this is one of the very first light roast espressos that I had that was any good. I went to a place called Macau, which is a big gambling hotspot, and there was a cafe called Bloom's there, and they had a modified La Marzocco machine that made a 6 bar espresso. Now, this is 10 years ago, before we were shipping, before anyone was doing profiling, and it was good. And I thought, okay, that was the first time I'd had less than 9 bar. And it made an acceptable light roasted espresso. So gentle and sweet is there for a couple reasons. One, for light roasts, lower pressure is going to mean less channeling. Light roasted coffees will tend to resist pressure less well. And if you channel, it's going to be sour, it's going to be watery, it won't taste good. So less pressure, good. However, why is it 6 bar? It's 6 bar because generally under 4 bar, you're not making any crema, you're not really making espresso. The flavors that come out tend to be more drip coffee. So espresso, I generally think of as being between 6 and 9.5 bar. Gentle and sweet is on the low end of that at 6. Now, gentle and sweet is also recommended to people just starting out for 2 other reasons. One, less a problem nowadays, but when we launched the DE1, there were a number of grinders out there with plastic burrs. They were not very good. They didn't grind very fine, and gentle and sweet did not need as fine a grind as things like blooming and adaptive. And the other is that when you're first starting out, generally you don't have very good puck prep skills, puck preparation skills. And gentle and sweet with the 6 bar of pressure demanded less of you. So let's go ahead. A bunch of rules about what we're going to do today. We're going to use beans. They're called Chelchele. They're from L'Alchimiste Coffee in Bordeaux, France. So Chelchele, Chelchele. And we are using them. They are light, but not ultra light. So there's no cocoa flavors, no roast flavors, but they're not a super challenging bean either. And we want to use them for all these because it'll taste good in all these different approaches. I just spoke to the head roaster at L'Alchimiste, and they're going to be sending us some ultralight beans. We're going to do a separate episode about the challenges that those pose. So 18-gram doses, always the same bean. On this grinder, which is a 98 millimeter flat burr grinder, we are doing the slowest RPM, the slowest rotation, and the reason is the higher the RPM on a grinder, the more fines you create. And with light roasted coffee, generally you're looking for clarity of flavor, not so much body, not so much thickness. And the more fines you have, the more you're going to have an uneven extraction. You're going to have the larger particles extracted one way and the fine particles extracted much more. And that tends to create a muddy flavor. Also, those fines will end up in the cup, creating a kind of silty thing. So the slowest rotation is what you want on your grinder if you have speed control, if you're doing light or ultralight beans. And we're going to be spraying the beans with a little bit of water. That is also highly recommended with light roast, highly recommend with flat burr grinders. All flat burr grinders create static. Don't blame the manufacturer, it's just how it is. And one little spray, it's called the Ross Droplet Technique, RDT, will neutralize that. You don't want to use generally the spray if you're using the niche, but we're not using the niche today, we're using this beast. Okay, let's make an espresso, and I'm going to zip it while he does that. We've just made a gentle and sweet espresso, and this was quite successful. It is meant to be a fast shot. There is no pre-infusion, there's no hold, there's no dripping. It's an espresso in a traditional way. What that means is lots of fast flow. The flow would continue at a high rate if it could in a traditional machine, but what happens is the puck compresses, slows the flow down, and then out it goes. Now, because the pressure is constant, which is what you see here at 6 bars, the flow rate goes up. Now, why does the flow rate go up? It goes up because about 20% of the material in the coffee puck is ending up in the drink. And as the puck is eroding and losing material, it's losing puck resistance, and so flow rate's going up. This is all quite normal. We do not want this to be a long shot. If it takes 30 seconds with a light roast, it's going to taste really over-extracted. So nice fast flow. Just rule of thumb, light roasted coffee wants either a long pre-infusion or fast flow. Okay? Just to repeat again, light roasted coffee, you want either a long pre-infusion or fast flow rate. And the reason for that is light roasted coffee doesn't give up its coffee material up so easily, not as easily as darker roasts. So, so here we've got 2 mils per second, ending up a hair over 3 milliliters per second. I really wouldn't want to be down here in 0.5 or 1.0. I've seen people do that. That would be fine with a darker roast, not for this. Let's get a spoon out and get a taste. What do you taste, Mark? Oh, that was not very good. Thanks. What do you taste? I've got this mopped up. I'm good.
Okay. It's very. So I can taste peach, red apple. So it's almost like a very ripe fruit kind of taste. But as the name suggests, it's gentle actually. Mm-hmm. So it's even though we are putting out 18 grams in, 33 grams out, but it's not those espresso very intense in your face, that kind of mouthfeel.
I agree. I'd say I'm going to play the human refractometer. It feels like an 18, maybe 19% extraction. And so it isn't super high TDS, which is total dissolved solids. It's not super concentrated. It's quite easy to drink. The acidity is under control. It's super pleasant. Like, if this was your first decent espresso shot and you had just bought it and you bought light roasted beans, you'd be very pleasantly surprised. We can do better, but this is a really good, I'd say, training bicycle. So I'm quite happy with that. I don't think I have anything to say. Let's move on to Extractamundo dose. And once it's made, I'll explain what the story is behind this, this profile. You can just go ahead.
Yep.
And so that was a 1.4 grind, arbitrary number on this. And what is the grind on the?
1.5.
1.4. Okay, so same grind on Extractamundo dose. All right, we have just made a Extractamundo dose espresso. Again, 18 grams, same grind setting of 1.4 that we did for gentle and sweet. And if you compare the curves, you'll see it looks a lot like gentle and sweet. Look at this. It's aiming for a 6 bar of pressure, right? And then the flow went up, though not as much. Now the main difference is it's got a pre-infusion phase here with a pause. So where the gentle and sweet filled up the group head and then went immediately to pressurize, this has got a few seconds here where it lets the water just sit. There's some dripping coming. This is dripping coming out here. So pre-infusion, draining down, going up to 6 bars. Didn't quite hit 6 bars with the same grind setting, and the reason it didn't is because that extra pre-infusion is going to require a finer grind if you want to get the same kind of pressure. So gentle and sweet, because it smacks the coffee puck, is going to create more puck resistance. Now, we don't really understand why that is, but it's absolutely the case that if you get rid of pre-infusion, you get higher pressures. So let's go ahead and taste it. Tell me what you think.
The acidity is way more pronounced than gentle and sweet. It feels like shorter in my mouth.
Shorter, okay? Like it drops off faster?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Overall, it's more sharp.
Yeah, it is a quick shot. They're both about the same amount of time. I find this a bit fruitier, a bit juicier. I personally enjoy this one more. And what else would I say about it? It feels a little bit higher concentration, like the TDS is a little bit higher on it. It's a bit bitier. I feel like this is less gentle. I don't know whether what Mark is sensing as kind of less of an extraction, less flavor, is caused by the variation of shot to shot. Because I would expect this little pre-infusion to extract a bit more out of these beans. Now, if you've got beans that don't have any defects, and what we're doing is, by the way, if you don't have beans with any defects, then you want to extract more and more. If you have beans with defects, you want to extract less. And I've ordered these profiles from extracting less to extracting more. And so gentle and sweet extracts the least, Extractamundo dose has a short pre-infusion, Adaptive has a much longer pre-infusion, Blooming has a crazy long pre-infusion, and Allongé is just lots of fast flow. So we're going to extract more and more out of the beans as we go through. So the other thing that's going on here is that these shots are all increasing in TDS and concentration. So gentle and sweet is going to extract the least, Extractamundo more, Adaptive even more. Blooming is going to be the highest, probably between 24 and 26% extraction, as opposed to this in the 18-19 range. Allongé is actually going to drop things back to about 22-23%. It doesn't extract as much as Blooming does. So let's go ahead and do Adaptive V2 next. That looks all right. We just made an espresso shot from Adaptive version 2. Now, Adaptive, originally when I launched it, was called Adaptive for medium roasts. And I wanted to try and figure out how to make Adaptive work with light roasts. And there's a couple changes I made. The biggest is that Adaptive, like Londinium, used to keep pressure during that dripping stage. But what I found is that that worked fine with grinders like the Niche, where there's lots of fines that would keep the puck integrity really high. But if you had pressure on the puck during a long dripping stage, then water would just gush out. And then at the end of it, you'd try and raise pressure, it would just gush. And so I changed it to make Adaptive version 2, where there's no pressure. And so what happens here is, I'm going to say no pressure, I don't maintain pressure. So we fill the group head, we hit a high pressure, and then water is just turned off. And then the pressure just decreases on its own. And this kind of very steep decrease is very common with a large burr grind, which is to say the water just does come out. You can see the water coming out here. There's a lot of dripping. Okay. Here we had quite a fair amount of dripping. So with a medium roast, I would grind finer, and I would want this dripping to be in the 4 to 8 grams of total. Here we've got 17 grams. We did the same thing for a video a week or two ago where we did 16 grams, and we found it tasted really good to have a lot of dripping, just to say a bit coarse. Coarser coffee is going to extract more easily. I know it's a bit counterintuitive. You would think that finer particles have more surface area, but the problem is that everything gets kind of clogged and you get less water flow. So coarser means faster water flow, more water flow means clean solvent, means pulling out coffee material. And then what's happening here with adaptive, and the reason it's called adaptive is there's a pressure rise that times out after 7 seconds. So it rises pressure according to this goal, but after 7 seconds gives up and adapts to the coarseness of the grind, in this case about 6.8 bar. That's what I've got here. In fact, 6.8 is what it says. This is the new skin streamline that's telling us the peak was 6.8 in the pre-infusion phase. And then it switches to stable flow, and you see coffee's coming out very quickly. I spoke to Jonathan Gagne about this very, very short extraction phase, and what he told me was with these flat burr grinders, the coffee extracts explosively. That's the word he used, explosively. And what he means by that is after all this time, because bear in mind we're now 18 seconds in, we're finally now applying some pressure, and the coffee has had water contact this entire time. So it's just soaking up, getting really full of coffee. You apply some pressure and it just comes out super fast. And you can see here the pressure decreased quickly, and it didn't really have a chance to get crashing in pressure because the shot's over. Let's have a taste. What are you feeling?
I find it has a longer aftertaste than the previous one, and it has also quite a bit of layer. Like still very fruity, but I think I like adaptive so far.
What about body, mouthfeel?
It's a little. I feel like it's thinner than gentle and sweet. Like,
it's fine. I found it thicker.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Two people can disagree to agree, or agree to disagree. Yeah, this is tasting more extracted. For me, the acidity's actually diminished, and there's a whole lot more flavor here. I feel like it's much more round. I'm 20-30 seconds in, and I'm still getting flavors coming out. Stone fruits are coming out, so you're right, peach flavors. I think I got pineapple at the start. I don't know if I have red fruits or not. I think you were right with peach originally, but it's pretty wide, and I'm happy with that. And I think that's really the goal with a really good bean, is to try and not get spiky extractions with single flavors, but to try and actually get as much roundness as you can, which is to say as many different things, and hopefully flavors in balance. That's a really good extraction. I don't get any dustiness, I don't get any off flavors. The one thing I would say here is our extraction of 18 in and 33 out. I think we could have pulled this out longer. I think instead of this extraction of 1.78, I'm normally doing 2.3 as an extraction. Now, what you want to do with coffees when you're deciding what ratio to go with is first start with a lower ratio, like 1 to 2 is fine. And if it's tasting a bit old, dry, a bit filter coffee in a bad way, shorten the ratio. By shortening the ratio, you're going to take less flavors out, and especially some of the bad flavors are going to get extracted toward the end of the extraction. You're just going to get rid of them. And the fact of the matter is most coffees have some off flavors. We're very lucky. That's why we work a lot of chimistes in Bordeaux. Their coffees tend not to have any defects, so we're looking to push the extractions as far as we can go. Given that this is tasting just great and it has a lot of mouthfeel, we're not going to do it now, but I would extend this ratio out to 2.3. I might even go to 2.5, see what this pressure does. If this pressure really crashes and at the end I'm at 2 bar, I've gone too far. I'm going to start getting bad flavors around that 2 bar. But as long as I'm, say, above 4 bar, just keep going. If I have some shots that have these nice lines like this, and I have other shots that are crashing, that's puck prep. That's what's causing that variation. If every single shot has the same line, then that's just the reality of what it is like. We accidentally didn't change the grind size, and so we said, what the heck, let's just pull another adaptive, but this time at a 2.3 ratio, so 18 grams of beans and 42 grams out. Things I'll say about this shot, one is the dripping is almost identical, which is good. That means the grind is not moving about, that's good, but I was surprised we got slightly less pressure on this, which tend to indicate there was the puck prep was not as good as the previous one, or maybe we've just gone a little bit coarser, but that's not the case because all 3 of these shots have been at the same grind setting, so we don't have any grind wandering. The other thing to note is pressure started to go down and started to go up slightly. The burrs on this are not SSP. We had SSP burrs on it, but we were finding it hard to grind fine enough to espresso, we were finding it hard with the SSP burrs to grind to espresso fineness. The manufacturer is working on their own burrs, which they say are as good as SSP. Everyone says that. Yeah, we have installed them. They do grind much finer, but they do have more fines than the SSP ever did. So we're kind of trading one thing for another. We can grind finer, but we have more fines. And the reason I know that there's more fines is because this pressure started to go up. That means there was some fines migration. With the SSP burrs, we didn't see that for quite a long time. It took a long shot to see any pressure flick up. Give me your thoughts, Mark.
I find it very similar to the previous adaptive. The aftertaste is quite long. The layers just keep coming on. But somehow the fruitiness, the acidity feels a little bit more pronounced than the previous one. Yeah.
For me, I don't like this as much. I feel like I'm not a fan of filter coffee. So if you are a fan of filter coffee, you might prefer this. Just to say that straight out right. It's got a bit of dryness to it. And it doesn't have as much as that brightness that I really like. That is more like an espresso. So this is, having pulled it longer, it's tasting a bit more like filter coffee. So I also find it a bit more muted. The mouthfeel is decreased as well. It's a little bit thinner on the palate. Probably the TDS is decreased too because we put more water in, and as the shot continues to extract, it's going out. So for me, I wouldn't drink it this way. I would pull back on the ratio and try to get back to that fruitiness. As these were progressing, for me, Adaptive V2 with that shorter ratio, the 1.8, was great. I had all the fruitiness, I had a lot of mouthfeel, but I also had a lot of acidity. For me, that was kind of the ideal light roast espresso, which is kind of the holy grail. This is the reason that we actually made this machine, was to try and make espresso with light roasted beans. So I was really happy with that. Now, people who come from a filter coffee background with light, ultralight beans, probably it's not what they're looking for. They're probably looking for something with more extraction, more length, and that's what we're going to try next. We're going to do a blooming espresso. We have just made a blooming espresso, and I was watching it as it was extracting, and I told Mark, I think it's going to be too fine. And the reason I thought it was going to be too fine is I was watching the dripping, and it was barely dripping. Actually, before it even dripped, I had an inkling it was too fine, because when the water came in here and stopped, I should immediately see the bottom of the puck fully saturated. And I didn't. It took 3 or 4 seconds before any water appeared on the bottom, and then it slowly coalesced. And then maybe 10, 15 seconds in, I started to get my first drips. Actually, it wasn't until about 30 seconds in that I started to get some dripping and very little dripping. So I'm looking at the scale, about 8 grams of dripping by the time the pressure rise happens. And here we didn't even get a gram. And now that's because we made a big leap in grind settings. You didn't purge, right?
No.
Okay, so that's probably, I'm gonna guess what it is going from a very fine to a very coarse setting. There was probably still some very fine coffee grounds on the burrs, and that's going to then mix in very much like fines would, and overall make the whole thing too fine. The other thing, there's a bunch of things I can tell you here that it's much too fine. So first of all, it needs to finish here in like 10, 12 seconds. So blooming is an extremely long pre-infusion. It is the highest extraction that you can get currently from any espresso profile. We've seen as high as 28, even 29% extractions, but 23 to 24% are typical. Now bear in mind, you go to a cafe, you're looking at 18 to 19% of the coffee material in a cup. So 23% is very high. Scott Rayo, when he demonstrated this at World of Coffee Berlin, there's a famous video where he makes it for James Hoffman. He was measuring 28% extractions, which are crazy high. And he was using a super weird Kenyan on top of it. So it was amazing, but it wasn't really coffee. It was some new thing. Let's taste it. And what I'm going to expect is that because we have essentially a brick wall of pressure here, it's going to be really muted, at the same time that it might be quite acidic from the long pre-infusion. But let's see. I could be wrong. Yeah, it's very muted. So,
the acidity or the the layer that we had before at the previous ones is all gone.
What's interesting though is you've got quite a lot in the cup, 60 grams, and there's still quite a lot of extraction. So there's a lot, there is some mouthfeel, there's a lot of flavor, it's just kind of muted.
Yep.
It's a very unexciting coffee now, which is a shame. I think we've just made another blooming espresso. We've gone from a 0.5 grind to a 0.8 grind, and it looked better. The water did appear on the bottom much, much sooner. We had 2.3 grams of dripping when I looked at the scale before the pressure ramped up, but we're still too fine. We're still too fine because you can see very little dripping here. I was aiming for 8 grams. And we also hit max pressure. The flow rate was not able to achieve the goal because we hit maximum pressure. It was only after the puck started to erode that we started to decline. Now it's good news that we did decline. So we weren't too far off, and we weren't too far off on achieving the flow. I'd expect this to be drinkable, but it's not going to be a great expression. I really want this pressure here to never hit a brick wall of the maximum pressure allowed. So ideally it goes up, and then it comes down, and it's probably going to come down really dramatically. So let's, I'm going to say a few more words, and then we'll make another shot. We're going to do a 1.0 grind. Instead of a 0, we want 0.5 for the first two, 0.8 for the next one, 1.0 for the next one here. We're going to taste this and see what we think. Oh, I'm doing the wrong spoons. I am stirring the crema in as I try and do taste. What's your thoughts?
I think the acidity that started to come out is less muted than than the first one. So that's definitely we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, totally agree. That dryness, that boringness is going away. Not just the acidity, but the fruit's starting to come back. I would be okay drinking this now. It's not an amazing coffee, but it is totally acceptable. We're now going to do one more blooming, again coarser. We have just made a blooming espresso at the coarsest grind so far. This is a 1.0 grind, and there was a lot that I liked about this. So first, I saw water appear on the bottom of the puck almost immediately. I was really happy objectively with Mark's puck prep, because I saw dripping everywhere. And it didn't start from one side. The previous shot, when I looked at the bottom, I saw water come from the side, and then it was more dripping from one side. This was really very even. We had, as it said, it popped up 6.7 grams of dripping. I was aiming for 8. Now that's just a rough guideline. It's not an objective measurement, because really what I wanted was this pressure to be between 6 and 9 bar. So we've gone now slightly coarser than I normally would want to go with this. I still got some crema, which is interesting, even though the pressure only rose to 4 bar. So I would expect this to be quite fruity, very extracted. And if there are any flaws in this, which I don't think there are, in the bean, they should come out now. Now tell me your thoughts on the flavor.
The aftertaste is quite long actually, and also acidity and sweetness, it comes out quite balanced this time than the previous one.
Okay. I am not the judge, so I am not a certified taster. My favorite still, just for reference, I love that adaptive. So that's what I'm looking for there. And when we get to Allongé, that's going to be the kind of shot I like, because I really like fruity. And this feels very nicely extracted, but I feel like it tastes kind of, sorry, but brown. It tastes a bit like full-bodied coffee, and it's lacking some distinctiveness for me. So I don't have that brightness. I do have a bit of mouthfeel to it, which is interesting because there's a lot in the cup. I feel like if we pulled this with a little more pressure, we might get more of that fruit back. And so I'm going to stop. We've done 4 of these. That's enough for today. But that's what I'm trying to get to. Now, I want to point out some things about blooming. Just if you are frustrated by puck prep, by your grinder, just do not do blooming. Blooming is the hardest shot to get right. I mean, we've got really great grinder. His puck prep is looking great. The beans are good. And still we're struggling with this profile, because it has this incredibly long pre-infusion, which requires it to be very fine. But if it's too fine, it goes over the max. If it's not fine enough, we don't get enough pressure. The reward is you get extremely extracted coffee. So if you have very expensive beans and you've got a fair amount of them, then you can play with blooming. So we're working with blooming right now because we have 3 kilos of these nice beans. So we can try lots of things. But if you had 250 grams of beans, please do not try blooming. You're just going to waste the beans, and that will be kind of a sad thing. I would say if you don't have a lot of beans, go for Extractamundo dose. If you have a little bit more, maybe adaptive. What people say about Extractamundo dose, when I did a tour with Scott Rea throughout Europe, we asked the people who said that they were consistently making good espresso what profiles they were using. And Extractamundo dose, if they were light roast people, came out over and over again. Adaptive also came out as a very common one. So the other thing I'll say about blooming is if you, for example, have light or ultralight Kenyans are very hard. You might not be able to grind fine enough. You might, in fact, kill your grinder. I have had grinders seize up regularly, overheat. With my Weber grinders, I love Weber grinders, but the motors are not the most powerful in the world. In order to do blooming espresso with Webers, I've had to turn the grinder on and slowly feed the beans in. If I put the beans in at the beginning, it just seized. So I still was able to make great coffee, but it was tough. You might also want to put a paper filter on the bottom of your portafilter for blooming. We're having some luck here. We had some nice sustained extraction, but it's quite common to have this pressure crash. and some paper on the bottom of the portafilter basket under the coffee will help that pressure from crashing. If you have a new grinder and the burrs are not yet seasoned, especially the case, that paper is going to help. So there we are with that. And finally, we're going to make a Allongé espresso next. We've just made a Allongé espresso, and the grind setting mark on that was
1.8.
1.8, so that is by far the coarsest. When you make the Allongé, don't be too upset if you see some channeling. This is a very fast flow rate. It is the fastest flow rate espresso that Decent currently makes. It's 4.5 milliliters per second. He's dialed this in really nicely, and the puck prep looked really good. Now, how do I know the puck prep was good? Well, the pressure didn't crash. Now, I did see some channeling, and there was like a consistent needle coming out at the same time that it was coming out the center. Be great if that didn't happen. That's going to add a little bit of dilution, a little bit of acidity, but the shot looks quite good. And what's really interesting about Allongé is despite very fast water flow, we're getting crema. And that's because it's pressure that creates crema. And the fast water flow is also going to extract quite a lot. And I'm going to let this sit here while I babble a little bit, because another aspect of Allongé is the very fast flow and the high temperature means that the coffee that's coming out is the hottest also of any espresso. So you have a lot of volume, and it's very hot because it's flowing really quickly through, so the coffee puck doesn't have any time to cool the water, and you're adding a lot of hot water to it. So don't mind if you put it into a large ceramic or transfer something else or swirl it a bit or just let it sit while it cools for a second. With a spoon, it'll be okay. We do have another video where we talked about knowing that Allongé has been dialed in correctly, but just to summarize, it's supposed to be 4.5 mils per second, and I want that blue line to actually be hit. If I hit the pressure max, which I did here, the flow will adjust down, but here the grind is one little smidge too fine, really just barely so, because only 3 or 4 seconds, enough puck erosion happened that we started to get a pressure decrease. And we didn't crash, which is great. I do think these burrs have a bit of fines in them because I'm seeing this taper out. If I had done this on the niche, it would have gone back up like that. And I think if I did this on an SSP, I would have seen the pressure do this. That would have been fine. That's a characteristic of those burrs. Let us taste this. What do you think?
Somehow I think it's quite gentle, I would say. It's a little bit muted for me compared to like if I compare it to adaptive, that one's way more pronounced. Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, first of all, the dilution on an Allongé is about twice the strength of filter coffee. So it is stronger. If you're used to filtered coffee, you're going to find that too strong. But if you're used to espresso, you're going to find that quite gentle. I was always surprised also that Allongé, despite the really fast flow rate, is not especially acidic. And look at the cup. If you compare this cup to the others, right, look at all the spray on blooming and very little spray. So even though we had a bit of channeling, it was pretty under control. So I think this is a nice extraction. I think this is not the right coffee for this. I think I'd want to use something like a natural that had just crazy fruitiness. That would be a lot of fun. Anything with crazy fermentation, Allongé would be great. This is a really clean, washed coffee. And what we've done with Allongé is make a very pleasant drink, but nothing that wows. Of these, which were your favorites?
I would go for my top one would be the adaptive, and the close second would be Extractamundo.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. What's interesting is they look quite different, right? Extractamundo look like gentle and sweet, but with a short pre-infusion, whereas adaptive had a much longer pre-infusion and a pressure curve, but they gave different. They gave not that different results. which I thought was really interesting. So those are the main profiles that I would use with light roasted coffee. Now, of course, this is a changing field. There's lots of other profiles that you can try, but with this range of profiles, you should be able to make tasty coffee from any light or ultralight bean. And that's the summary of this session today. Thanks for watching.